Hello everyone, this is Serious Trivia. Welcome to a patch 1.5 breakdown video. This will be part 1 of 7 videos where I will break down the patch 1.5 patch notes. Previously we've done super long rundowns of the previous patch notes, and I felt like it's probably more effective if I categorize different changes in the patch note and break them down in shorter, smaller videos. So for our first one here, we'll just be looking at the new characters that are added in patch 1.5. So right off the bat, we have the Warriors of Wu. Now these two generals here, Chen Pu and Zhou Tai, are some of Wu's most reliable and longest serving warriors. And Chen Pu in particular is represented by his steady hand, and he gets a unique battle ability Exemplar, which improves the performance of all other allied characters on the field. Zhou Tai here is a former bandit who becomes a trusted warrior of several generations of Wu leaders. His most famous deed was saving Sun Quan from the bandits, receiving many deep scars in the process. To represent this, he gets a unique ability. If he is in battle with the character with whom he is Oaththorn, he becomes unbreakable and heal over time, but have decreased melee evasion. Okay, so the format that we're going to be doing this breakdown is that I'll talk a little bit about the lore of each character, and then we'll look at their in-game stats and talk about how we should utilize them in the game, and so on for all the new characters that got new models in this patch 1.5. So starting with Chen Pu here, Chen Pu is basically the longest serving and oldest general in the Wu faction. He started his career out serving under Sun Jian, as Sun Jian battled all throughout China, and a lot of the great Romance of the Three Kingdom feat, like defeating Hua Xiong and defeating Lü Bu, that's attributed to Guan Yu, is actually more related to Sun Jian and Chen Pu's feat. So definitely a great warrior, and he went on to serve Sun Ce as Sun Ce tried to, pursue the legacy of Wu, to build up the kingdom of Wu and continue in his father's footstep. And even after Sun Ce's death, Chen Pu continued to serve under Sun Quan and was the vice admiral under Zhou Yu during the Battle of Chibi, and served till his death of old age for the kingdom of Wu. So he's definitely the most accomplished officer in the Wu faction as a whole, and also one of the longest serving. Opposite him is Zhou Tai. Now Zhou Tai in the game is described as a former bandit. Historically, I don't know if that's true or not. It just doesn't say very much. It just says that Zhou Tai and Jiang Qing, the two former bandits in the game for the 194 start, joined Sun Ce when Sun Ce started to move south to pursue his legacy of Wu. And Zhou Tai here was a person that Sun Quan, the young brother, at a young age was very fond of, and requested to Sun Ce to have Zhou Tai as his bodyguard, or just a general who stayed with him. And Zhou Tai did that. And as Sun Ce was busy conquering the south from the bandits, Zhou Tai was in charge of protecting Sun Quan and transporting the family from one town to another. And during one of their movements, they got swarmed into a bandit ambush where thousands of bandits just, attacked their escort. And it seemed like Sun Quan was going to die in that battle, as after the battle, even on his saddle of his horse, there were many, cut marks. What happened was Zhou Tai basically hopped onto the horse with Sun Quan and shielded him with his body and fought their way out. And at the end of the battle, he had 12 very deep scars on his back, and that really took him a while to heal. But after he healed, Sun Quan's relationship with him grew a lot. And later on in future battles, he will end up saving Sun Quan again. So Sun Quan, definitely liked him very, very much. And he's also a pretty accomplished general for Wu. And that's why we see him having the unbreakable and healing bonus, and also the decreased melee evasion, because he did take that many scars. So looking at these two characters in the game, first we have Chen Pu here. First thing to note is that his background right in the beginning of the game is called Bandit Killer. And if we look at the background bonus, you get 30 points of expertise, 10 points of instinct, 20 points of authority. So the very standard 60-point boost for a legendary unique model character. He gets +1 resiliency at the beginning of the game. You get another layer once you hit level 4. Plus 5 melee evasion is very nice because it's not really a faction-wide bonus when you're in leadership role, but just something that's added on top of your character. And since he has such high expertise in the game, and he is a sentinel with ability to get more expertise, he's going to have super high melee evasion, making him one of the better duelists in the game. His faction-wide bonus from his background is plus 2 public order. I think this just reflected the fact that he's a bandit killer, so you gain public order because you're taking down the bandits. His most interesting attribute is his unique ability here. It's a unique passive buff called Exemplar, and this has infinite range and infinite duration for all generals on the battlefield. That's allied generals, and all allied generals will gain 33% melee attack rate and plus 10% melee evasion. So obviously this plays into not only his personal role as a great duelist, because you're basically, for sentinels, you're having super fast attack rate and super high evasion, and you just chip away at the enemy general while taking very little damage. He kind of brings that bonus to all generals on the field. So he's very, very good. If you have a chance to capture him or acquire him as any other faction, or if you're using him as Sun Ce's faction, he's a great addition to your army. Now, if you look at his armor, just reinforces his build. Extra 15 points of melee evasion. That's on top of his background bonus and his high expertise. 18 points of expertise and 15% speed. So definitely great build overall. Very strong character. And the armor looks great. Has the white tiger tied on the bottom. A very tiger theme for all the southern factions. Just great look overall. And there's one thing in game that you have to note, is that he does start out the game as bandit killer, but if you play him long enough, he'll end up acquiring a different background through an event that will make him be called as Elder Cheng. Now the reason for this is because we said he's one of the longest serving generals of Wu. Unfortunately, although I know that this is an event in the game, I don't have an image capture of the bonuses for it, so I'm not going to be able to share it with you guys. It's up to you to find out what happens. And I believe you will only get this event if you play as Sun Ce. So that's something to look forward to. Now, our second character here in this grouping is Zhou Tai, the Reformed Brigand. And from this background bonus, he gets 5 points of expertise, 10 points of resolve, 15 points of instinct. So if you see, this is only 30 points. And it's much less than the 60 that Trample got. So that's a little not as good. But maybe they'll change this later. And you get plus 1 resiliency and 10% armor for all shock cavalry if you're in a leadership role. Now the 30 point usually happens for characters who have a unique background but don't have a unique model. Maybe he would get the upgraded treatment and have increased that in the future, but regardless, he probably doesn't need the stat because Undying Vow, his unique ability, is just absolutely broken. This is the one we talked about where he loses 100% melee evasion, but he stops fatigue gain, is immune to fatigue, and is unbreakable, as well as heals 75 health per 10 seconds. So all in all, it's active whenever all your Oath Thorns are alive. So it requires you to have an Oath Thorn in the army that you're in, and for them to stay alive. Kind of drawing on to his lore of protecting Sun Quan. Now, this is best used for you to just charge around the battlefield into enemy infantry. It's not great for dueling because the 100 melee evasion debuff will absolutely kill you. The fact that you are tireless and will not gain fatigue as you battle, and it's unbreakable and with heal, means you just keep charging enemy infantry. Don't lose your horse, don't charge into spear units, and you'll do a ton of damage. And this playstyle is reinforced by his armor. You see he gains 18 instinct points, 5% melee attack rate, which actually doesn't come into play for the charging, but 12 charge bonus is added on to him. So it's pretty much reinforced his playstyle. Now, previously in the game, he was called the Man with Many Scars, I believe was his background title. And I believe that he will be able to acquire such a title should he proceed with a story event, similar to how the Bandit Killer Cheng Pu will pick up an event to become Elder Cheng. So you'll see that probably in the game as well. He also has a very glitchy skill tree, because if you look at the beginning of the game, when you level up, you not only have the Bandit skill tree, you also could skill up on both sides of the skill tree. It's really weird. I believe this is a bug. I don't think this is intended that way. I think it's when they modified his original skill tree into a bandit skill tree that they got the active skill for the mighty knockback skill there messed up, so that both side of it's activable. So that's why you can also start on the left side as well. It definitely helped him as a character in the game, but I think this will probably be patched up in the next patch. Okay, so these are the Warriors of Wu, and going on we have the Qiao sisters, Da Qiao and Xiao Qiao. The Qiao sisters were renowned for their beauty and elegance, and were married to Sun Ce and his best friend Zhou Yu. It is said that it was Cao Cao's desire to claim the Qiao sisters as his own concubines that led him to engage in the disastrous Battle of Red Cliff. When both Qiao sisters are in the same force, they will grant all units increased morale and resistance to fear. So, this is a new game mechanic where you have two generals with the shared ability that activates only when they're on the field together. We'll talk about this when we look at their character. Let's talk a little bit about their lore. Now, the Qiao sisters' family resided in Lujiang, the commandery that you start out taking at Sun Ce. But he didn't acquire them then in 194. It was all the way till Sun Ce broke away from Yuan Shu around 199 and relaunched his attack against Lujiang, which he gave over to Yuan Shu early on, and retaken it from a man named Liu Xun, who starts out under Yuan Shu's faction in this 194 start, that he was able to acquire these two sisters. And they were renowned local beauties, and Sun Ce and Zhou Yu took on each of them as a concubine, because they were already married at the time. So these are not wives, they are concubines. Sun Ce took in Da Qiao, the older sister you see on the left, and Zhou Yu took on the younger sister, Xiao Qiao, on the right. It's very sad life for Da Qiao because Sun Ce would die 4 months later, and she would be a widow pretty much very soon after her marriage. And she vanishes pretty much from history after that. They are, fan fiction attempts of her story afterward. There are some accounts that she cried for, a month after his death and died from depression. And there's other stories where, Cao Cao's lusting over these two sisters. And because the Romance of the Three Kingdom version of their name used a different character for Qiao, when in fact that their last name in real life is actually the Qiao that's the same word as bridge. And Cao Cao had a poem depicting these two bridges that was built in his palace that Zhuge Liang twisted in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms to say that when he refers to two bridges, he is referring to the two Qiao sisters, and uses it to goad on Zhou Yu, who is married to Xiao Qiao, to have Wu help out Liu Bei in the Battle of Red Cliff. But that's all in the Romance of Three Kingdoms. The probably didn't happen in real life. Xiao Qiao had a slightly better ending than her sister. She was married to Zhou Yu for a while, and they had, at least 7 or 8 happy years before Zhou Yu also died very young. Of Zhou Yu's kids, it wasn't really recorded if any of them were hers, and it's likely they're not because they're probably from his earlier wives. They play a very, very minor role in the historical sense, but you know how beautiful girls are portrayed in history. Characters like Dale Chan and who are completely fictional, get an outsized proportion of mentions, and these two are definitely renowned beauties for the South. So, looking at their in-game stat, we have Da Qiao here, who's called Daughter of the Southlands. You get 30 points of stats, 10 expertise, 5 cunning, 15 authority. I really like her role as a commander in the game because she's representing the wife of the faction leader, and you could, often put these characters in as your heir slots. So also gives her a much more regal look. She has the Qiao sisters ability, which we said only works when both of the sisters are in the game together. And all friendly units within range of this ability, which is the whole field, so basically all friendly units, will gain plus 10 morale and becomes immune to terror. This is pretty strong, especially given how morale has been nerfed from all other passive abilities or skill boosting. So 10 points of morale here is pretty strong. If we look at her armor, it's nothing too special. You basically have 10 base armor. It's just a dress. You get 18 authority, plus 10% speed, and plus 2 morale when attacking. That's when you are not you're physically attacking, but when your army is on the attacking side. So there's another layer of morale boost. But this is for herself instead of the whole army. It's pretty decent, I guess. Nothing too crazy here. And if we look at her younger sister, Xiao Qiao, also bonuses, daughter of the Southland, same title, but she has a 10% character experience bonus instead. She's made into a strategist character in the game, and it's to make her prettier. I think Deltran's also strategist. You have these blue and pink dresses that goes along with it. It's pretty nice. She also has the same exact Qiao sister ability, and it's only active if both of them are on the field together. And her armor has also 10% base armor stat, but gives 18 expertise, which is very interesting. It doesn't boost cunning, which is what you would think. The expertise does give her a bit of melee evasion, and then you also get 10 points more melee evasion from the armor, and additional 10% character experience boost on herself. So she's also an interesting character. You could probably get a lot of character experience boost, and it plays into Sun Ce's shared expertise playstyle. So she could be potentially very useful in your faction, and obviously you're never getting rid of these unique model characters. So moving on, we have Liyue Rebels. This is Chen Gong and Gao Shun. Chen Gong and Gao Shun both served Liyue during his brief time as independent warlord. Though they did not always get along, they refused to betray their master even after he was defeated. Both were executed by Cao Cao as a result. Chen Gong has seen the good and bad sides of both Cao Cao and Liyue, giving him a detailed understanding of the flaws of great men. This is represented by his battle ability, which debuffs enemy warlords in the area around him. Plays him well, and he can turn an otherwise unfavorable duel into another character's favor. Gao Shun is a mighty warrior. Though his stern and disciplined demeanor often clashed with his erratic master Liyue, he remained loyal till the end. He led the Camp Crashers, an elite unit who would be found in the thick of any fight. His battle ability increases the splash radius of his attacks, allow him to scatter weaker foes with ease. Okay, so historically, these two characters have very different backgrounds. Chen Gong here was local magistrate in the Joongdal area, which is around Inchuan, and he was the one who helped Cao Cao acquire this region, his starting faction region, after Liu Dai's death. So if you guys remember in the 190 start, Liu Dai starts out in that region. He died of natural causes soon after, and it was Chen Gong who helped Cao Cao acquire this region officially. And he supported Cao Cao for a long time, but as I mentioned in the preview video, what happened was that Cao Cao was mocked by a lot of the local scholars in the Inchuan region that his grandfather, or adopted grandfather, since his father was adopted, is a eunuch. So Cao Teng was a eunuch, and eunuchs were very looked down upon and didn't get along with the scholar class at all. So many people didn't view Cao Cao as this legitimate upstart because of his relationship with the corrupt side of the government officials. So Cao Cao had most of these scholars executed, and some of them were Chen Gong's friends. So Chen Gong kind of became disillusioned with Cao Cao at that point, and that's why when Cao Cao went to attack Tao Tian following his father's death at Tao Tian's hand, Chen Gong worked out a way to get Liyue, who was just across the Yellow River under Zhang Yang's faction, to come over and to take over Cao Cao's faction and attack his base of operation where Cao Cao's main army was away. And then he went on to assist Liyue throughout Liyue's journey of defeat and being sheltered by Liu Bei and his betrayal of Liu Bei, and finally his destruction. Chen Gong is described as someone who is quite talented strategically and offered Liyue some plans to withhold against Cao Cao's attack, but his plan was kind of ignored on Liyue's wife's request, so it would be Lady Yan. And the reason that Lady Yan kind of advised against the strategy was that Chen Gong argued that he and Gao Shun would defend the city while Liyue would take a strike force out to cut off Cao Cao's military supplies. Lady Yan had a young child with her at the time, and she argued with Liyue that if he leaves the defense of the city to Chen Gong and Gao Shun, who didn't get along very well, that it could cause an issue, some sort of mutiny or some sort of, chaos within the city. It'll endanger his family. So Lü Bu kind of decided to just stay and defend in the city, and eventually the city got flooded by Cao Cao's strategy and caused a mutiny among some other generals, and Lü Bu was defeated and captured at that point. And at the end, Chen Gong was asked by Cao Cao many times to come back and work for him, and Chen Gong refused, and Cao Cao had him executed at the end. Now, Gao Shun, on the other hand, is one of these generals who has always been under Lü Bu, and he's most famous for training 700 elite unit called Camp Crushers, which in Chinese is called Xian Zhen Ying. And this unit is a heavily armored infantry unit. They're just famous for, getting into the thick of battle and coming out victorious. Some of their most famous wins are against Liu Bei, Guan Yu, Zhang Fei's troops. It's a very small unit, but very elite unit. Gao Shun as a person is described as someone who's very disciplined and stoic. He doesn't drink. He doesn't indulge in himself. He's very disciplined with his troop, and he's very loyal. But he's not someone who you get along with very easily because of his stern and stoic demeanors. So Lü Bu, although know that he could trust him, didn't actually, was not close with him. And after Lü Bu's capture, Gao Shun didn't say a word to Cao Cao and just basically awaited his execution, didn't beg for his life or anything. So that's why you have characters like Joongdal who ended up joining Cao Cao, and you had a character like Gao Shun who was just executed. Now, Joongdal in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms is described to have joined Cao Cao after Lü Bu's capture because Guan Yu had put in a good word for him. But historically, the reason why it worked out that way was Joongdal was in charge of moving military supplies for Lü Bu's army. So at the time Lü Bu was captured, Joongdal wasn't even in the city. So when Joongdal arrived, Lü Bu was already done, and the execution were all over. So he just surrendered, and Cao Cao just took him in. So it's a very different story than the romance version. But these two characters are great in game, and let's look at their stats. Chen Gong here is the Master Magistrate, which is the same background bonus he had from before. He does get more stats. He has 40 points of stats, 10 expertise, 25 cunning, 5 instinct, 1 layer resiliency. He also gets +2 public order, faction wide if he's made into a leadership role. It's not a very big bonus there, but his most powerful ability is his new ability called Analyze Weakness. Not only does this 8 additional cunning, which is kind of unusual for skills because usually it's 4-4 split between 2 skills, so he gets extra cunning here. But his bonus is that he provides a 50-meter range debuff on enemy generals that will lower their melee evasion by 20% and armor by 20%, and it's infinite duration. So usually you have a strategist that has the ability Wisdom of the River that would just drop their melee evasion armor to basically 0 for like 30 seconds, and you try to win the duel in that time. For him, he can do it constantly at a smaller rate. It's not as game-breaking as Wisdom of the River, but it's just very nice because Lü Bu has a very solo and dueling playstyle, so he's a very complementary piece to that strategy. His armor gives him 18 additional cunning, pretty great. 30% range block chance, which doesn't really matter much, and 15% speed, which is helpful for him to get around to do the Analyze Weakness without getting killed. So maybe the 30% range block chance also helps with that, because he'll be riding into the neutral ground where the dueling is happening, just to apply his debuff. So that's Chen Gong. And moving on, we have Gao Shun. Now, Gao Shun was in the game, didn't have any background bonuses, was a generic vanguard. Now, all of a sudden, he has not only a unique model, but also a unique background called Formation Breaker, which is a ode to his unique unit Camp Crushers, because their purpose is to get into the thick of the enemy formation and break them. And he himself has a 45-point stat boost, which is pretty great. And the stat distribution is very great too. You get 20 resolve, which helps with health, and 25 instinct, which help with damage. He also has reduced penalty from desire for higher office. I think this is a reflection of his, stoic background. He doesn't complain, and he has unbreakable on top of that. And all Camp Crusher and Flying Riders, which are the unique units that Lü Bu gets in the 194 starts, get 35% upkeep costs when it's his retinue. So that's a reflection of the fact that Camp Crushers was really his elite trained units, and he gets 20% retinue upkeep on top of that. So pretty ridiculous. 55% discount for these elite units. Camp Crushers is top tier. One-on-one, they will crush Imperial Gate Guards because of the splash damage, and they carry the same Zhanma Jian that's added into the game, but they have better armor. And historically, they are just a heavily armored unit. I don't think historically they used Zhanma Jian. That's for the game effect. It just looks cooler with a giant sword. But this unit was definitely historically accurate and also very, very strong. And to have cheap units of this as his unit is definitely reflective of that. And he himself has ability called Scattering Blows, which it strangely has the Earth symbol, but adds 8-pointed instinct and looks completely like an instinct ability. So maybe they'll change that. He has 100% splash, a melee splash attack range. Now this bonus is on himself, so it's not like all his unit will extend their attack range twice. But as a general, he'll be able to clear space in melee. It's probably best used against units rather than duels, because in duels you're one-on-one, the splash wouldn't really matter, and it's only active for 30 seconds, then goes on a 60-second cooldown. His armor is great, 70 base armor on his armor stat, 18 points of additional instinct, 5% melee armor piercing damage, and 5% melee attack rate. He's just going to be a really great unit, not only to charge into enemy units, but to stay in the thick of battle, as he can get melee splash range on his basic attacks. So that's Gao Shun. Going on, we have the final pairing here, the two Zhangs, and our Zhang. So these are Zhang Zhao on the left and Zhang Hong on the right. The two Zhangs are close friends of the Sun family and two of Wu's most important officials. Zhang Zhao is an excellent administrator known for his stern and uncompromising attitude. He frequently lectured the young Sun Quan and old Sun Quan, for that matter, on the importance of patience and the need to avoid rash risk. Zhang Hong is an adept diplomat who can smooth over diplomatic relations as minister or operate abroad as a spy. When both are in the same force, they improve the missile damage of all units in the army. So like the two Tell sisters, the two Zhangs also have a unique ability that only activates when they're both on the battlefield. So either you're running a two strategist army, or you're running two armies that travel together and end up on the battlefield together. They're pretty interesting characters. I'm quite surprised they got their models in during this patch, but for Zhang Hong in particular, I think now is his time to shine. A little bit about their lore. They're not equivalent. Just because they're mentioned together and they're nicknamed the two Zhangs because they had the same last name does not mean they're family. They're not family, they're not related, and they're not on par with each other. Zhang Zhao is the much more talented and famous person out of the two. He also lived longer and had more impact on Wu's faction as a whole. And he was a renowned scholar from the north that escaped south. And many people in the north knew about him and respected his literary abilities and also his strategy approach. He led armies in the early days, especially right after Sun Ce's death. He had to help put down a lot of the bandit uprising that kind of rekindled itself following Sun Ce's death. But after Sun Quan came of age, he mainly served as a visor role. He was never made into a prime minister because he was very stern and uncompromising, and Sun Quan was very uncomfortable around this old teacher of his. And he gave Sun Quan basically advice that was pretty harsh and straight up. And their relationship was very rocky. Even though Sun Quan respected him, Sun Quan, as he grew up, A, kind of changed in a lot of sense, and B, was tired of being talked down to by Zhang Zhao. So they had many episodes of, arguments and situations. And Zhang Zhao just, despite the fact that Sun Quan is his lord and master, gave pretty straightforward advice and didn't really care about the consequence. I think one of the funny stories I shared during the preview video is that Joongdal once gave advice, and Sun Quan commanded him to never come back to court. And then after he went home, Sun Quan sealed his front gate, only the front gate, with basically mud, and just telling him to never come back. And then his response was sealing the inside of the same front gate with mud and implying that he never wants to come back. And eventually Sun Quan's idea or strategy there backfired, and Sun Quan wanted to make up with him, but he refused to come out. So Sun Quan set fire to his front door, burning it down and going in to apologize with him. He lived very long, into his 80s, and served not only Sun Ce but also Sun Quan as well. And these two Zhangs were not really close friends to the Sun family at the beginning per se. They were just very renowned scholars who had escaped south, and Sun Ce went out of his way to go recruit them. Now, Zhang Hong had his most shine during this period. Even though he lived till 60, he was quite old already when Sun Ce recruited him. And the game mentions him as a spy or as a diplomatic relationship character, and that's because he served as an ambassador of Wu in a sense. So in the beginning stages, you have to realize Sun Ce still answered to the Prime Minister Cao Cao, who held the emperor at court. So they had to send some officials over to represent their interests in court, and Zhang Hong was a character who went to Shu to serve in the imperial court, representing Sun Ce's interest. And following Sun Ce's death, Cao Cao had plans to invade the young Sun Quan and pretty much end the Sun family. But Zhang Hong made an argument in the court, saying that not only is this move against a young kid not just, following like his older brother's death, it's also not in the best interest of Cao Cao. And Cao Cao was convinced by him, and thus he kind of saved whatever Sun Ce built at the time, because it was very rough for a couple of years after Sun Ce's death, as you could imagine, having a young Sun Quan take over. And afterward, he was able to come back to Wu and serve in the Wu court under Sun Quan, but not very long. He died at 60, as we said. It's pretty old back then, so I wouldn't say he died young or anything. It's just that he started out a bit old. In game, we're going to kind of see this reflected in a different sense. So first off, we'll talk about Joongdal here. He starts out the game 39. You get 55 points. So they did give a lot of respect to his skill in general. You get 25 cunning, 30 authority, 15 points of satisfaction faction-wide if he's the prime minister. That is pretty great. If you ever get him as a character in other factions like Liu Bei, who really need satisfaction boost, it's something you want early on. Later on, it's probably useless because you pretty much want this as an heir position bonus. Because once you get prime minister, you get the imperial court. So you get 7 characters that's using their authority to boost satisfaction. You probably never need to worry about satisfaction at that point. So this bonus become kind of moot then. So if you could offer some sort of marriage to steal him, maybe that's something you want to do. Marry him into the family and then just pop him in as heir to boost your early game satisfaction, especially on higher difficulties like legendary, where you start out with minus 10 satisfaction. Otherwise, just looks good as a number but doesn't actually impact the game that much. His ability is the 2 Zhangs, similar to the Tell sisters. If both of them are on the field, they grant infinite range on the field of 20% range damage base boost. So not armor piercing, just 20% range damage boost. It's pretty good. I mean, if you like to run range armies like me, this is a pretty great bonus. Nothing against this. His armor, 10% armor base, because it's just a robe. 18 cunning, 30% ammunition boost. I believe this is on himself, so you would want to give him a bow, maybe an imperial bow with a bonus with the silver sword, but he does have a unique armor, so you're not going to get that really nice firing rate bonus one. But he basically gets extra ammo on himself, 15% speed to help him kite a little bit, so maybe you can use him as a lone horse archer. But that's up to you. He doesn't have a lot of health, so you gotta be careful there. Looking at his counterpart, Zhang Hong, the adept diplomat, kind of reflective of his abilities as the ambassador of Wu there. +5 diplomatic relationship with all factions, only if he's in a leadership role. +3 cover gain per turn when spying. So you can kind of think of his diplomatic role as a spy as well, and he's definitely strong in that. He starts the game out much higher level than Joongdal, and slightly older at 42. So you can send him out as a spy pretty early on, and many factions will hire him, and maybe he can, do a lot of missions there. Some of his best missions you could think about is maybe discredit faction. I find that really useful in the new patch with the new turncoat system, because if you could lower the faction's satisfaction and cause a lot of units to be willing turncoats, you could steal a lot of legendary characters that way. Overall, you get the same 55-point bonus. The game's kind of treating them as equals. 30 cunning, 25 authority, and he's have the same ability. Armor's also very similar. He gets 15% range block chance instead of ammo boost. The thing about him sending him out as a spy is that you'll pretty much lose the 2 passive buff. It might not be a big deal. 20% range damage, although it sounds pretty great, it's not too good. I mean, if you have like Onyx Dragons and you have like 40 or 50 base melee attack, sure, you get 10 extra points. That's pretty strong. But if you are running like crossbow armies or like a lower tier archer militias in the beginning of the game, the 20% here is not really going to do too much. But anyways, both very fun characters. And these 4 pairs of 2 or 8 generals are more of the unique ones in the game. The other 2 that are pretty unique but not included here are the free LC characters in Bai Hu and Yu, who is his brother, younger brother here. And we're playing, a Bai Hu campaign right now, so we talk plenty about their lore. But in case you're not watching that, the Yan family or the Yan clan was a pretty big clan in the Wu commandery in the south, same commandery from where Sun Ce's family came from. And they gathered up about 10,000 men, local thugs basically, who decided they didn't want to pay taxes and kind of formed their own bandit group in the mountains. And for all those, bandit factions who don't pay taxes, who resides in the mountains, they had a collective term at the time called Shanyue, which also reflects on a lot of the minority tribe that lived in the mountains at the time. But these 2 are Han ethnic group characters, and they pretty much just didn't want to pay their taxes and went into the mountains. And they got along with a lot of the local administrators because they didn't cause too much trouble. And since they come from a pretty big clan, they were respected. But when Sun Ce went south, they became a clear target, and many of the local groups thrusted them into the leadership role of a loose coalition. And Wang Lang and Bai Hu were pretty much Sun Ce's key target. Sun Ce didn't give them a lot of respect, thought they were just thugs, and he was pretty much right about that. Yan Yu tried to go negotiate with Sun Ce, but Sun Ce kind of tested his resolve during the negotiation by, lunging his sword into his seat. And it caused Yan Yu to jump, and Sun Ce pretty much knew right away that he wasn't really brave or anything, and instead of negotiating, just had him executed and returned his head back to Bai Hu, who kind of fled out of fear at that point, and they bounced around trying to hide in different places, ultimately defeated by Sun Ce, and then eventually tried to surrender to Sun Ce. Sun Ce didn't accept the surrender and just executed Bai Hu as well. So not a real big splash historically. We're doing much better with them in game. But let's look at their characters. They're much more fun in-game characters. So Bai Hu here is the White Tiger. You get 50 points of stats, 20 expertise, 10 resolve, 20 instinct, all great combat stats. You are a sentinel, so you do have a lot of melee evasion. You give a faction-wide bonus of 5% replenishment, which is always great. You have the unique ability of tactical withdrawal. This gives all unit within range 50 meters, 30 seconds of 20% speed, 20% melee evasion, and 33% penalty to melee attack rate. So this is designed for you to run out your ambush unit if they get discovered or if you need to reposition. But someone pointed out to me that it's also great for charging. So if you have a cavalry charge, you don't really care about your melee attack rate at that point. You could just increase their speed and charge them into the enemy for extra damage. So that sounds pretty good use of this. He has a unique weapon and a unique armor, so I kind of put both in without the image there to fit. His weapon is called the Tiger's Claw, 24 melee attack rate, Pretty okay. It would have been better if it was 30 because it's like a sword weapon. 1.4k base damage and 1k melee armor piercing damage. All these are on large unit size, so double them if you're playing on extreme. You get additional 10 points of expertise, 5 points of instinct, and 10% melee damage rate. It's pretty good. I don't see anything wrong with it. You're basically going to be a high attack rate, high evasion sentinel character, but you're really not going to be dueling very much with Yan Bai Hu because you do have the other unique bandit ability called Poison Volley, which just annihilates enemies. His armor, 50 points, not the highest, but pretty good if you want to maintain pretty good speed as you kite around with Poison Volley. 18 expertise helps with melee evasion and an additional 15 points of melee evasion on top of that. And most importantly, he gives himself and his retinue stock, which makes him invisible on all terrain, and he can move and still stay invisible, and can create him very good shooting angles for his poison volley, from the side of the enemy formation where you just shower them with poison arrows. And he also gets 15% speed on top of that for kiting and repositioning. So overall, very, very strong character. Not as good as a leader because you do have low authority, so you have some satisfaction issues early on as a bandit. But the good news is if you get to bandit leader, you do unlock a position that eliminates all desire for higher office, so you don't ever have to worry about satisfaction again. Going on to his younger brother, the Tiger Cub Yan Yu. Tiger Cub give you 40 points of stat, 20 resolve, 20 instinct, 5 melee evasion faction wide if he's the leader. It's so-so. It does help your brother out a little bit with more melee evasion. He doesn't have any unique ability. He does have the bandit ability, Mending, which heals and gives armor and melee evasion. So he's good there, but he's not super unique. His armor gives 18 points of resolve, 55 armor base, 10 points of melee evasion on top of that. So he does have a fair bit of melee evasion in combat and 15% speed. So pretty interesting character. It's nice to have a second unique character for a bandit faction. Joongdal and Zhang Yan still waiting for theirs. So moving on, we have other minor characters that's added in this patch. You had Jiling, who is added into Yuan Shu's faction, and Shu Shu, who comes in the event for Liu Bei's faction around the 204 or 205 year. And these two characters were previously in the game but just didn't have models or backgrounds, or they had some. Shu Shu had backgrounds. Jiling here, if we just take a look at him. About their lore. So Jiling is most famous for being witness to Lü Bu's greatness. So Jiling was given 30,000 men to attack Liu Bei by Yuan Shu. And when he arrived, Lü Bu came to help. And Lü Bu only came with 1,000 men, invited Jiling over to his camp for dinner. Jiling was afraid to go. So Jiling invited Lü Bu back to come to his camp for dinner. And Lü Bu just came by himself. And he tried to mediate peace between Jiling and Liu Bei, and didn't want them to fight. So Lü Bu put out a ji, the weapon, and put it all the way at the end of the camp's main gate. And he walked back to center camp. I think if you do the historical calculations, anywhere from like 60 to 90 meters. And he took out a bow and pretty much bet with Jiling, saying that he can shoot an arrow and hit the small dagger part of the ji, because the ji is L-shaped. So he's saying he can hit the base part of the ji that comes out. And Jiling doesn't believe him or just watches him do it. And Lü Bu shoots one arrow, hits the little dagger part, and Jiling loses the bet basically, and leaves the attack. Basically, Lü Bu single-handedly with one trick shot ended a war. And Jiling in the game here is given the title of Blunt Instrument. He gets 10 resolve, 30 instinct. He doesn't get any unique abilities on his skill tree, but he does get 10 charge speed and plus 5 charge bonus for shock and melee cavalry in his own army. So he doesn't have any leadership ability, but that's great. I prefer more backgrounds without leadership abilities because you only have so many leadership roles, and these more army focused bonus or more administrative focus on individual characters provides them with better playstyle. His armor is pretty standard, 70 armor base, 18 instinct, 30% range block chance, and 15% speed. Nothing wrong with him, and it's nice that Yuan Shu finally gets a unique general to go along with his faction as well. So moving on to Shu Shu. Now, Shu Shu was Liu Bei's first strategist. He's called the Reformed Vigilante because in his youth, he was kind of this Youxia character, try to, do good in the land, kind of your wuxia dream type of character. And he got into trouble with the law because he helped a friend revenge someone. So that's why he's the Reformed Vigilante, because he got trouble in the law. And he kind of took on like a pen name when he first approached Liu Bei in the novel, and then later on revealed that he is Shu Shu. So Shu Shu is his real name. He just approached Liu Bei with a different name in the beginning of the novel. He has a lot of stats. He has 60 points of stats. So the full unique character amount of stats: 25 expertise, 25 cunning, 10 points of authority, +1 resiliency, and +2 starting rank for all melee infantry recruit. So it's kind of drawing on to his life in the beginning as a roaming Youxia. So kind of says roaming swordman, but his mind is his sharpest weapon. He does have the burn trait, and he will leave you through an event. So take his sword. But he has a good chance of coming back because he will get the Heartbreaker trait after he leaves. And at that point, you might be able to get him back either as a turncoat, or he might just leave Cao Cao's faction. And the story behind that in the romance version is that after he worked for Liu Bei, Cao Cao tried to steal him. So Cao Cao's plan was to trick his mom to come to Cao Cao's capital and then ask her to write a letter to convince her son to come, because he was a very filial piety son, very respect of his parents. And his dad died, so he's single mother type of situation there. And his mother refused. She kind of caught on with Cao Cao's trick and didn't want to write a letter. So Cao Cao had someone write a letter for her in her handwriting, or just basically threaten, trying to blackmail Shu Shu. And Shu Shu left, and his most famous act is recommending Liu Bei to go seek out Zhuge Liang at that point. Historically, it's a little different. He was able to work under Liu Bei with Zhuge Liang at the same time, and he only left because on their escape during Changban, where Liu Bei was being chased down by Cao Cao's men, not only Liu Bei's wives were kind of in danger, all the families' wives, so all the officers' families were traveling together, and they were attacked together, and Shu Shu's mom was captured during that battle. And at that point, he decided to go join Cao Cao to basically save his mother, in a sense. And that's when he left. And famously in romance, it says that he promised Liu Bei to never give Cao Cao any advice, but historically he worked under Cao Cao's faction for like 35 years. He just never shined very brightly, so you don't hear much about him in history. His armor in game is pretty neat. 18 cunning, minus 10% retinue upkeep, which is pretty great. A lot of Liu Bei's character have retinue upkeep discounts. Might be reflective of his poor background, but it's a nice addition here, as a lot of the premium range units are quite expensive, and 15% movement speed on top of that. So moving on, we have the two wives that are added, Lady Bian and Lady Mi. Lady Bian is Cao Cao's wife, and Lady Mi is Liu Bei's wife. So Lady Bian wasn't originally Cao Cao's wife. She started out as a concubine. Lady Ding was Cao Cao's first wife. We kind of mentioned this in Cao Cao's preview video. Lady Ding was not Cao Ang's real mother, but she kind of looked after him as he grew up, because Cao Ang's real mother was Lady Ding's maid, who's also ended up being Cao Cao's concubine, and she died very young, so Cao Ang pretty much grew up with Lady Ding. And when Cao Cao got Cao Ang killed, Lady Ding couldn't forgive him, so she left, kind of like a separation divorce, and Lady Bian kind of rose up to become the new wife. Remember, only one wife, multiple concubines, and she was a very great matriarch for the family, because you got to think about Cao Cao's out at war at all times, so she had to hold down the fort, and she's Cao Pi's mother, and we can look at her in game. She's the humble matriarch, and they changed all her traits. She had terrible traits at the beginning of the game, and Cao Cao and her never got along. Now they actually get along, and her bonus change with a unique background to giving +5 satisfaction faction-wide. She only got 30 stat points, which I think is okay. You get 10 cunning and 20 authority, and her armor gives 18 resolve, which is really strange, because I would thought they would give her just more authority, but they gave her 18 resolve, 15% range block chance, and 30% speed. It's almost as if they want her to charge out onto the battlefield, which she's never done in real life. So don't know why they went with this style here. And Lady Mi, on the other hand, is Liu Bei's wife and also the sister to Mi Fang and Mi Zhu. She was under Tao Qian's faction, as with her two brothers. And when Liu Bei took over Tao Qian's faction after their death, they basically joined Liu Bei's faction. And she's probably the reason why Mi Fang and Mi Zhu kind of supported Liu Bei to take over Tao Qian's faction after their death, because they married their sister to him. And she gets steadfast loyalist as a bonus. She gets plus 10 satisfaction to all characters. And still 30 stats, 20 authority, 5 expertise, 5 resolve. As we mentioned, the satisfaction bonus is very, very good for Liu Bei's faction because you're trying to get more unity points by keeping people happy. And this pretty much counteracts all higher difficulty, the legendary debuff on satisfaction, which is worth 10 points. She also gives plus 3 morale if she's commanding a general army. So that's also nice. They made her a unique character here, which I'm not too surprised, because moving on, she's going to eventually die. Most famously during Changban, when Zhao Yun saves the kid, Lady Mi sacrifices herself, jumps into a well to give Zhao Yun a chance, because if Zhao Yun had to protect her and the kid, it would have been more difficult. But Lady Mi's armor here, 40% base armor, 18 authority, which is a nice addition to making her heir to get that background bonus. 15 melee evasion and 15% range block chance. So she could be quite decent on the battlefield as well. She has good stats, distribution, good leadership role, good armor, melee evasion, and additional morale. Plus 3 morale is not bad. A lot of skills now only provide plus 2 morale. And if you look at her beginning skill tree here, you get 2 of the 4 essential leadership skills as well. So making her definitely a great wife for Liu Bei, who started out single in both the 182 and 190 starts. So with these characters wrapped up, we have 3 additional ones. Now these 3 characters are all leaders of factions in this new patch, and they are Wang Lang, Liu Yao, and Li Jue. So starting with Wang Lang. Wang Lang is casted out to Kuaiji as administrator down south. This reflects his historical post, and he was defeated and captured by Sun Ce. And after a while, Cao Cao requested him to go work in the imperial court. And as we mentioned, Sun Ce at this time was still loyal to the pseudo Han government, with the emperor being controlled by Cao Cao. So he granted Wang Lang's passage there. And Wang Lang was a very famous scholar at this time. He had a lot of annotative work on books like I Ching and a lot of the Confucian works. And all his annotation and study and commentary was nicknamed the Wang School of Confucian thought. And what made him even more famous is that his granddaughter was married to Sima Zhao, and then they had a son with Sima Zhao called Sima Yan, who would become the first official emperor of the Jin dynasty. So because of his family's relationship to the eventual Jin dynasty, for most of the Jin dynasty, the Wang school of Confucian thinking was the official government version of Confucian studies. So that's a little bit about him. And next is Liu Yao, who is the government-sanctioned governor of the Yang province. But when he went to his post, Yuan Shu has already taken over the Yang province, so he wasn't able to, set up his government where he should have been. But he went farther south and set up a separate government and tried to basically wrest control of the Yang province from Yuan Shu. Didn't end well for him, as Sun Ce was sent to attack him. He lost a few battles, didn't lose the war. What he lost was his life, as he died of young age, 42-ish, just died of, natural causes. But he was pretty famous. He's Liu Dai's younger brother, and he was well known in his youth for being very daring. When one of his uncles got kidnapped by bandits or was asking for ransom, he actually gathered up 10 followers, and they dressed up as bandits and joined the bandits. And then from the inside, they rescued the uncle. So not a bad man at all, but just kind of Yuan Shu messed him up by taking over the Yang province, which would have been his. Liyue is Dong Zhuo's old man. They were generals under Dong Zhuo all the way from the Liang province days, and after Dong Zhuo's death, the Liang province group and the Bin province group, represented by Lü Bu, had a civil war, and Liyue won that civil war along with Guo Si. And then afterward, you had this huge mess that plays out at the beginning of this campaign, where Liyue and Guo Si then breaks, and then Liyue and the Dong separatists then breaks, and then Liyue and Yang Feng loses the emperor to Yang Feng, and that's kind of his end at that point. But he had a brief rule as Dong Zhuo's successor. So these characters are kind of tertiary characters. I don't have their full image, but we have their armor and their stat bonus. So Wang Lang here has 18 authority on his armor, 15 range block chance, 15 speed, and 50 armor base, which isn't bad for commander armor. He gets just 30 stat boost, 5 resolve, 15 cunning, 10 authority, and plus 10% character experience. For all three of these characters, you have to wait till their faction gets destroyed to recruit them. So that's why it's hard to get a full character panel. Liu Yao's armor here is 18 expertise, 15 speed, plus 2 morale when attacking, 55 armor base. His welcoming magistrate bonus gives him also 30 points of stats, 15 expertise, 10 points of resolve, 5 points of cunning, and 20% food production, which is an interesting boost. None of these are super good. Li Jue's boost is probably the most significant here. He gets 18 instinct on his armor, 10% melee armor piercing damage, 15% speed, 65 armor base. It's a vanguard character, so that kind of makes sense. His stat is all over the place: 7 points of resolve, 15 points of instinct, and 8 points of authority. So I don't know why they end up picking these numbers. They do add up to 30, but why not 5, 15, and 10? He has a really bad debuff that causes minus 10 satisfaction for all characters if he is the leadership role. But late game, it's actually okay. If he survives into your late game, this doesn't actually hurt you, because the fact that if you have Imperial Court, you have 7 characters with their authority stat boosting satisfaction, you can survive this minus 10 without any problem. His other bonuses are what makes him great. You get 10% retinue upkeep discount, which is pretty amazing, especially after they nerf all the cavalry upkeep discounts. So this can help you, gain more points towards gaining free cavalry again. Also 5% replenishment bonus, which is always welcomed. So that wraps up our rundown of the new characters. As you can see, even this video is super long, as we talked about each character individually, about their lore and about their in-game stats. I will be doing 6 more of these this week. I'll try to do 1 every day. I'll see if I can keep that schedule as we run down the entire patch. So hope you guys enjoyed this one, and see you all next time. Bye!